Welcome to Impact Quantum, the podcast where we unravel the mysteries of quantum computing without requiring a PhD in physics. Join host Frank Vigne, a self-proclaimed quantum enthusiast, and Candace Gillhoolley, a proud quantum-curious individual, as they dive into the latest developments in the quantum realm. From quantum annealing to the global race for quantum supremacy, they break down the big ideas shaping the future of computing, business, and security. In this episode, they discuss the three major players in the quantum space: IBM, Google, and Microsoft, the implications of quantum encryption, and why quantum tunneling is more than just sci-fi teleportation. They also explore how quantum computing could transform everything from weather prediction to national security. Oh, and did we mention Impact Quantum is now the number 5 ranked quantum computing podcast on FeedSpot? Not bad for a spin-off born from too much quantum talk on the data-driven podcast. Subscribe now and stay ahead of the quantum curve. Let's get started after these 10 seconds of dubstep.
Hello and welcome back to Impact Quantum, the podcast where we want to explore the emerging field of quantum computing, what that means, not just in terms of the actual physical research and hardware, but also what that means for business, society, and economies. My name is Frank Vigne. I'm a quantum enthusiast, and it was a nice fall day in Seattle when I've discovered the wonders of quantum computing. And with me, I have Candace Gillhoolley, who is a quantum curious individual. How are you, Candace?
I'm good. Thank you, Frank. I'm great. I want to say the first time I heard about quantum computing was maybe when I was 8 years old, and we were playing in Armonk, New York at the IBM club. And my father, as you know, was an IBM inventor, and he was a quantum physicist, amongst other things that I didn't understand, and I still don't quite. But I remember like hearing about quantum, and this was when we were in this park in Armonk when we were like taking trails. So it's always been something that has been in my world, right? But unfortunately, I didn't get that side of the parental genes, and I'm not a mathematician. Algorithms are beyond me, but I still am so fascinated, and that's why I'm really excited about what we're doing here, about being quantum curious and not being afraid to ask questions to understand what's going on. I also want to thank our listeners. Our listeners are really interested in what we've put out there, and we've been getting a really great response. And thank you so much for being interested. And, let us know what else you'd like us to talk about.
I'll stop you right there, Candace.
Okay.
Not only are our listeners and viewers so awesome, we are now the 5th, according to FeedSpot, the 5th ranked quantum computing podcast, which is phenomenal. I think we were like 19th or 20th not that long ago. Now we're 5th. And our sister podcast is also seeing a good uptick too. So thank you to all our listeners. I know a lot of folks join us here from the Data Driven podcast too, because this podcast spun off because Andy and I were talking so much about quantum computers on the main show that people are getting annoyed.
But that's okay, because now they come here and they
come here. I mean, that's the beauty of the modern media age. You can spin off a very niche subject in a niche channel, and the costs are effectively negligible, right? It's not like we needed to create a new cable channel, get more satellite time, and like convince all the cable carriers to do it. Like it's just literally a few keyboard strokes and some graphics you throw together and a little bit of branding magic like you did, and bada bing and bada boom, as they say in Jersey. You have a new show. So thank you, everyone. So first off, I was in Las Vegas last week for an internal Red Hat conference, and I did meet I didn't know he was an IBM quantum ambassador, which is something like the Microsoft MVP program, but for quantum. And we were talking about this in our virtual green room, kind of like the three leading companies in the quantum space. And when you listed them in order, I would agree with I would agree with the order in which you did it, right? So do you want to say the three major players in the quantum space, at least in terms of big tech?
Right. In terms of big tech, we have Google. Well, sorry,
Hmm.
number one, we have IBM. We really just
Right.
have to really put IBM first. We have IBM, and then we have Google, and then we have Microsoft.
Yep.
So we've got three fangs who are really devoted to wanting to be the first, to get to market and get customers and um, convince customers that they need to move over to this, for a multitude of reasons. But frankly, the number one reason should be data security. I mean,
Absolutely.
this is really what quantum, is the convincing ticket there, is that you're going to have the kind of data security that other people don't. And I don't want to get political or anything, but I am going to say that, at right now, privacy and the protection of our private data, if you're in the States, as you see, is a little bit too open. So, the idea of protecting your data, protecting your company's data, that's vitally important. And that's what quantum can bring them.
Well, also, it's not just, any one particular government or administration. I mean, you have a very real national security threat when it comes to, the idea of being able to break RSA encryption, right? I think we went a little bit into this before, but basically all modern cryptography, more or less, is based on the idea that it's hard to factor prime numbers. And
Right.
quantum computing, thanks to research about the time I think your dad would have started at IBM, Shor's algorithm
Mhm.
um, proves it can be done a lot faster, which can cause a lot of cascading failure problems, right? So everything from your credit card to national security, nuclear codes could be broken in mere moments.
Right.
Um, and there's a big rush now to get what they call quantum resistant or quantum proof um, encryption. So it's the idea that you can at least have some kind of protection against these machines that, whether they come in, 5 years, 3 years, or 20 years are going to be a big game changer for society, particularly now that all of our infrastructure is so based on, not just electronic, but securing those electronic transactions,
Right. Right.
you know?
Absolutely. And I was thinking about just bringing us back. I know we might be jumping around a scotch, but, you know, you have America who, is the number one player, in this kind of quantum race, if you will. Then obviously you have China,
Mhm.
right? And then after that, which is kind of interesting, is you have Germany. And Germany is really trying to be the standout, in the EU, for quantum. There's a company, D-Wave, that, I've been reading their press releases lately, and they're really exciting in how they're trying to move forward to get. So it's like it's a hybrid concept, clearly,
Right.
but it's exciting, nonetheless, of what they're trying to do, and they're pushing really, really hard. Same with the UK. They're on the list of major players, as well as India. But I think it's important to kind of note who's trying to stand out because they're pouring money into it.
Absolutely. And you're seeing, because I think anyone can realize that there's a huge national security and economic benefit to whatever company, whatever national economy develops quantum first. I mean, this could be as big or bigger than the transistor was, or microchips or microprocessors, right? And we saw how much that it literally made Silicon Valley, right? Even if they don't manufacture anything now, it put all the people in kind of that one geography, created a whole ecosystem of venture capitalists and all these types of things that I think a lot of smaller towns and other places have struggled to replicate that level of that right now, varying levels of success. Right, Austin's doing pretty well in terms of their startup ecosystem. New York had Silicon Alley for a number of years, but the yardstick by which everything is measured is Silicon Valley, right? And I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. I have some faith in the Baltimore-Washington corridor because of just government research and the fact that one of the footprints for Amazon's HQ2 is in Northern Virginia, right? So it's not that hard to imagine things going well here. And as we were talking in the virtual green room, I'm going to share this little video here. Don't know if I can include the sound too, but let's give it a shot. One of the things that I wished we had, and this would be a good practical example of quantum computers, is the idea of and there's my dog who's making a cameo. Hello. Hello. Do you want to be a quantum physicist? So one of the things that's actually kind of, it really is like indeterminate here is there's a storm that's coming, and some people are saying that basically depending on which way the storm goes, over the Great Plains of Canada,
Right.
we're either, you got a lot of snow recently up in Montreal.
Seriously, I between yesterday and then and the night before, we got 2 feet, and
Wow.
2 feet, and not even 2 days before that we got a foot. So, and now it has like a drift of about 4 feet. But the thing is, it's Montreal, so the roads are clear. Okay,
Right.
like the
They're used
roads
to that.
the roads are totally clear. The day after is about them creating sidewalks for everybody again.
hmm
And then they do that thing where they send, like 6 trucks down. I mean, they really have it down. They really have it down. Plus, they have that private system where if you get your driveway, you get plowed out every time it snows. So there's a lot of small plows out there that can get it done too. So yeah, but there's still like at this point over 4 feet of snow on the ground, 100%. But I'd like
Wow.
to know, like they're saying it's supposed to snow. For example, they're saying it's supposed to snow every single day
hmm
between now and Thursday. Okay, and what I've come to understand is snowing, every day, in the winter here in Montreal, you can expect 1 to 2 inches overnight. I consider that now a dusting.
It's funny how quickly you adapt, right? Like I
Oh,
know, I know around here, the first storm is always like chaos. And then, one of the things that is unique about kind of the DC Baltimore area is that we're far enough north that we get kind of northeastern winters, kind of.
okay.
We
Okay.
kind of get the lower edge of that. And we're also far enough south that we also get kind of the southeastern storm patterns in the summer as well, right? So for the longest time, I really hated that. I'm like, we get the worst, we get terrible winters, we get terrible summers. And then I realized, I got stuck in Dallas because they got literally an icing, like just a little dusting, and the whole place was shut down. I was stuck in my hotel room like 2 years ago now. And I was just like, you know what? Maybe it's good we get like these different extremes because we're at least prepared for it. And in the DC area, the first big storm of the season shuts everything down, and then people remember. They get the muscle memory comes back, and they remember how to do the roads and stuff. Then the future storms don't seem so bad. But what's really interesting about this one is that because it's so far west, it could go like a couple of change degrees. It could, or based on different factors, it could go northeast and become a big nor'easter,
Hmm.
right? And it can go south. A lot of my colleagues, because work at Red Hat, they live in the Raleigh area, North Carolina, and they're predicting anywhere between like 3 inches and 13 inches or something like that, which is
Right.
one heck of a range. And we're somewhere in the the 5 to 10 range, right? So
Right.
um, I don't know how well Raleigh is prepared for a snowstorm, but I suspect that Baltimore is a little better prepared. But it's just interesting, like, here's a great practical example. The range of 3 to 13 is really complicated. I mean, what do you do? Like, there's those are pretty big ranges. So, like, if you had a quantum system that would be able to better provide a little more guidance earlier on terms of what the weather patterns are going to do, you can't predict the future. It's still very hard. but it would definitely give you a little bit more insight into what's going to happen with the weather, because weather
Absolutely.
patterns are relatively predictable.
Right, but it's also taking a vast amount of information,
Mm-hmm.
right, and putting it together. And kind of interesting is I don't know if this might lead us to our quantum annealing conversation.
Yeah, let's talk about that, because that's something that I know that D-Wave really excels at, the quantum annealing story, and it kind of get into what exactly is quantum annealing, because I know you were doing some research on that.
Right. So quantum annealing is the idea of solving something in the most optimal way. Okay. And you have to have a vast amount of information in order to work with it. And it comes together, and then when it gets heated up and all this information is coming together, at some time it stops and it like cools itself down. So almost like taking a sword, and when you're forging a sword, in the heat, and then you're going from the heat to the cold, and it's coming together. And at the moment that it gets cold and it comes together, it then makes a decision on what is the optimal way to go. And I thought that was kind of really interesting and cool.
I thought
um,
that was an interesting way to put it, right? Because I never got such a good example of quantum annealing. I'm basically, for the data science geeks here, it's a way to find the global minimum of a function, right? So, which is a fancy way of saying kind of what is the low point, right? So when you're dealing with AI, you're dealing with algorithms, optimizations kind of come to mind, right? You want to find out, where is the most bang for the buck. You can find that with traditional compute, but you're never really guaranteed if it's the global one, right? But you can always find the local one. That's relatively easy to find, right? You just keep searching for, if I make an adjustment in this direction, does the error rate go down? Does the loss rate go down? That sort of thing. So you can always find it, but you do know if it's the local or the global. Um, you really don't know. Whereas quantum annealing, and again, I want to dive further into this too, promises to find you the global one, which would have enormous implications in optimization of, how Uber gets a car to you, how FedEx will track get a package to you, garbage routes, that sort of thing, all the way down to, ML optimizations and things like that. It has enormous potential to change things in a way I don't think we can fully appreciate just yet.
I agree, and again, this is something that I heard about this through Business Wire. It was a press release that came out from D-Wave, and it's exciting. It's exciting what they're trying to do. It's exciting that they're putting it out there. They're making enough noise that they got to feel pretty solid about it. And I think that what the latest news I saw is that they've just gotten another customer. And that's a very big deal because essentially, when someone first, like we said, it's an entirely different architecture, and it's expensive to move over to kind of create. Nobody's really done that before on any kind of scale. So I think it's very exciting that D-Wave is making noise about what they're doing, and I find it very exciting.
Yeah, D-Wave right now is the leading company in developing quantum annealers.
Hmm.
And it is what's different about quantum annealing is it's not a general purpose kind of quantum computing model. Like you have, those are more where IBM and Google play and that. But it really shines on these optimization problems, which could have enormous benefits in a lot of different use cases. So it's not a full quantum kind of computing solution with gates and things like that, but it does do a really good job with that. Um, and then while you were gone, so I was at this conference last week in Vegas, and I think one day I spoke for 6 hours, and which is quite a bit. And then the second day, I only had to speak for maybe 4 hours. So It was pretty wild. It was, but you were sending
That's
me like,
exhausting. Oh, I was sending you notes nonstop, right?
I know, I was like, oh my God, I want to look at that. And then I was just like, I'm going to look at it when I get back to my hotel. I kind of get a quiet space because there really are no quiet spaces in Vegas. And every time I got back to my hotel room, like the first night after the speaking for six hours or so, I was like, I'm going to take a quick power nap and then I'm going to go get dinner. Close my eyes. Next thing I know, it's 4 in the morning. So it was like 6 p.m. to like 4 a.m. I was like, oh, wow. But I totally needed that. It's, I don't know. Vegas has changed. I think we were talking about that earlier today, like on a separate call. Like, I don't know. Normally, Vegas is just not what it used to be pre-pandemic. It's just a very different animal now. And like, I'm not sure if I like it more or less. Definitely less. Just a question of how much less. Maybe I could
Well,
do a quantum annealing algorithm to figure out how
yeah,
much less.
exactly. You have to figure out how to fix it, right? Well, in fact, I wanted to go back and I wanted to say, we've talked about quantum annealing, and
Mhm.
because we're quantum curious, and I know we talked about what's going on in the news and what different companies are doing, but I thought I could like give you a term or two and have you, explain it, because there are certain terms that are coming up that I think are quite valuable to understand from the very beginning.
Sure.
So we just talked about quantum annealing. That's was a good term to kind of understand. I'd like to ask you about quantum tunneling. We touched upon it, but I think it deserves a little bit more time. So tell me about quantum tunneling.
So quantum tunneling is the idea where you allow a system to pass through energy barriers. So instead of having to push the electrons through. Now, again, I'm not a physicist. I didn't stay in a Holiday Inn last night. But quantum tunneling is the idea that you have the ability to work through potential energy barriers that classically you wouldn't be able to do, right? So, like the idea that in normal physics, if a particle does not have enough energy to get through a barrier, this is the world we live in, right? Like if I try to run through that wall right now, it'll hurt me, and I'll
Yes.
fall back on the floor.
Yes.
But in a quantum kind of world, I'm not a particle per se. I'm going to behave like a wave, right? So I could theoretically push through that wall and appear on the other side, even if I don't have enough energy to kind of break through the wall.
Okay.
So this actually gets into a Schrödinger equation, which this is the point where I don't know if I've had enough coffee yet, but it's the wave function does not drop to zero. In other words, I don't quite bounce entirely off the wall, but some aspect of my energy does get through there.
Okay.
And there's a number of ways that this kind of works, right? So quantum tunneling in stars and then the sun, it allows protons in the sun's core to get away and fuse, right? In quantum and semiconductors, it allows electrons to move through barriers in nanotechnology and modern electronics.
Okay.
There's also applications in terms of scanning tunneling microscopes. Quantum annealing, it actually does play there, right? So tunneling helps find
Yes.
optimal solutions to
Right.
escaping local minima in energy landscapes.
Exactly. So I'm happy that we talked about quantum annealers first, right?
Right.
So part of the deal is that, from what I understand, is that in quantum tunneling, like you talked about the energy, and that the energy you didn't, that the particles might not have enough energy to get through barriers, but in a quantum world, they can
It may
get.
not need it. It may not need all the energy to
Right.
do that. So I may
Right.
not, and a good way to think of it is, let's just say I did run into that wall at top speed, right? But not enough to break through the drywall. But what would make it through would be the sound waves and the energy shock wave of my, I was going to say something rude, but of me slamming into that would make it through. So in some sense, I would have some impact on the other side.
Okay.
Right? It's not exactly a perfect analogy, but I think it kind of shows you that.
Well, that kind of works because I just looked up this definition, and because of what you're saying, what you just said just made the sentence I read make more sense.
Right.
And it said, like, imagine navigating a maze, and classical computing will try every corridor, but quantum tunneling helps you pass through some walls to reach the exit faster. So you can't get through everything, but you can get through some things to get to your outcome.
And I think there's a number of engineering outcomes you could pull out of that. And I think it really explains certain quantum phenomena that a regular classical physics can't explain, right? And I still think there's a lot that we don't know. Certainly there's a lot I don't know, but I mean also a lot that researchers don't know in that regard.
I totally understand. I mean, there's stuff that, my dad was doing in the 70s that, like, now they're optimizing and working on with quantum. And so it's sometimes, everybody's on their own kind of timeline. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
And when they can catch up, then, like, the great innovation can happen, right?
Well, it's always that argument of, like, kind of pure abstract math. And it's going to take sometimes a century, or decades for it to find a practical application.
Exactly. If the practical application is what matters, like, people did not have cell phones. You weren't calling Ubers. You weren't needing to optimize all these different, like we were talking about air traffic control.
Right.
And this is a perfect example, right? Never have there been more planes and helicopters and flying objects going around at the same time around the same areas as ever before. And it's leading to errors, and it's leading to human errors, and it's just too crowded. It's a perfect visualization, actually, of how we need better scalability to fix the problems, to optimize the data and make it so, this is the best way that we release the planes, or, this is the best way that, we bring them in, or whatever it is. I don't understand it. And that's not to say that what they're doing isn't great. I just think that, like, obviously with everything else, the computers and the technology are going to help them come up with more optimal ways of doing things.
I also think too that I think the pandemic has had an effect on this because a lot of muscle memory, I think, got lost, and because of the pandemic. Do you know what I mean?
People not having those jobs that, that they eliminated because they shut down. They shut down.
Not even that. It's just they went from having this, being operating at full capacity to no capacity for a while. And then the pent up demand is up. Like, you kind of see that. I think part of the reason why Vegas has changed, from my point of view, is that a lot of it was pent up demand, right? And a lot of things were shuttered. So you have to reskill people and things like that. And I think that air traffic controllers may be an extreme example, but I think that, I know people who've gone to Disney post pandemic and then kind of pre-pandemic.
Oh, okay. That would be interesting.
That's a marked change that people will describe, because, like, just the tribal knowledge, kind of like just the stuff that it's hard to kind of capture. It's just kind of like you learn it from when you join an organization. You kind of learn it. I think there's been a break in that, and it's not necessarily like enough to ruin things, but it's definitely enough to change things, right? So I think that there's a lot of weird economy things kind of happening here. So, like, I don't know. I think that, and particularly the DCA airport is really a good example of that, right? Because it's just a very busy airspace with a lot of security restrictions around it and stuff like that. So,
I mean, I have to say, because I fly into LaGuardia all the time. At least 4 times a year. I come, and I see Mom. And now that it's been completely renovated, it's beautiful. Now, you might have to walk from, one part of the airport to, everyone has to walk from one part of the airport to the other part. And I swear to God, it must be half a mile, if not more. Like it's really a long schlep, but it's still really designed quite well.
Well, this
Uh,
summer I had to go to LaGuardia, and I didn't
ah,
know that they had renovated it.
okay.
And I land and I'm like, where am I?
Where am I? Yeah.
This is way too clean to be LaGuardia.
Mm.
And I was
The
just
bathrooms are
impressed.
beautiful. It was like bravo. I think they spent like 5 years or something doing it, but bravo because it looks great.
Yeah,
It really
yeah.
does.
So, and no, it was completely unrecognizable. So kudos for them for doing that. The next thing we were talking about in kind of the virtual green room was um, spooky action at a distance.
Yeah.
And you had sent me an article, I think from Wired magazine and a couple other places, where when I think of spooky action at a distance or quantum, oh gosh, what's the actual term for it? Um,
It's Einstein's.
entanglement,
Yep.
entanglement.
Entanglement.
Right? I always thought of it as that you have the potential to do superliminal, which means faster than the speed of light, communications or reliable communications, so you don't have to worry about not having a cell phone signal, right? And that's for thing, right, where you're not dealing with just traditional radio waves. You could, if you could capture that ability, these two particles, whether they're in the same room or on the other sides of the universe, theoretically, because I don't think anyone's actually tested it that far apart, um, you could have instantaneous or relatively instantaneous communication, regardless of what's between you and it. Which my first thought was, wow, this would be great for communications, right? You always watch Star Trek, right? And they beam into like the middle of the planet, they still have good service, right? I can't go to like, the supermarket without hitting a dead spot, right? So I thought about that. But then the use case you sent me, and here's the article from Wired Magazine. It was from Oxford University, and they basically use particle entanglement to kind of work as a supercomputer together, right? So it kind of becomes a way to link up different um, processors. So
Yeah. I was
talk
like,
to me about that.
yeah, I picked this up today and I found it and they're talking about teleportation. And I'm thinking, wait a second, that's like Star Trek stuff. But it's exactly what they're talking about with quantum entanglement, having two particles that are separated from each other, having them completely react to one another and affect one another. And from the entanglement and affecting them, they can transfer information. So what they were talking about here was that they transferred data from one particle to another. And so it was the first, with, air quotes, teleportation of data. And so now that's really exciting, right? What does that mean? What's the next step? Where do we go now? How much energy did it take? Was it overwhelming? Like everything, we want to know everything, right? Isn't that exciting?
I think it's amazing. I think it just shows you just I don't think we can fully grasp the future here of what is going to be possible with this, right? In the same way you couldn't go back to, you know, 20, 30 years ago and say, the internet plus mobile phones is going to enable a new kind of connectivity, right? Like I didn't rent a car when I was in Vegas, right? I didn't use like traditional cab. Everything I did was through a rideshare app or well, okay, they had buses back and forth between the hotels and the airport because of the conference, but my flight home was way outside of those things. So, I mean, it just shows you just how impactful technology can be when you combine them in ways that just we really couldn't imagine before it was available, you know? And I think that we're experiencing that now, you know?
Right. This is the biggest evolutionary change in computer processing, in science, that this is the
Since the
next big
50s.
change,
Since the
right?
50s, yeah.
And this is the very beginning of it, right? And you know, that's why being a part of it now, being curious now, being open to getting more information and understanding now, is really going to be beneficial for you and beneficial for everyone. Me, it's important to know what's going on and why it's happening. I don't have to know how to do it.
Right.
I just have to know, how it optimizes whatever it is that I'm already doing. Right.
Exactly.
So
And, not everyone, I think we were talking to a startup founder not that long ago, and he was saying, he goes, honestly, there's probably too many quantum physicists in the quantum computing field. And I thought that was kind of an odd thing to say. But, you're going to need people who can market quantum computing technologies. You're going to need people who can develop for that. You're going to need engineers who could install it and maintain it. You're also going to need recruiters who could pull down all of those people. So like it's not just going to be, it's just like, not everybody in the big tech field is a has a computer science degree or an electrical engineering degree, right? It takes a village of people to support an industry. And I think that this is going to be the same thing here, is that obviously the more you know, the better, but it's not a hard requirement.
completely agree with you. I mean, I'd rather be the one using the technology than being someone that just has no idea what's going on and then being fully replaced by the people that understand the technology. You need to know what's going on. So I think that, that's why the news has been so exciting lately. And reading what's going on and then writing something out in my Tech Whispers newsletter. Again, just trying to kind of understanding things, from, the curious standpoint and following the journey of knowledge. When I really, you told me to start working on data privacy, and understanding it. And so I was doing that. And then when I hit upon the idea of quantum, of how it's going to completely, really protect the information in a way that what we have going on now just can't.
Right.
And I said, "Oh my God, that's the game changer. That's the game changer." And so that's why you see, US is really, is leading the charge. And I guess no one really knows what's going on in China because it's China. And Germany is being very forthcoming about what they're discovering and what they're doing. And this teleportation that came out of the UK. I think these are some interesting companies to kind of watch. What do you think, Frank?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think this is going to be the space race or a space race of the next 20 years. So one of the talks I gave at this conference was basically talking about AI and how AI is the be all and end all of today. But I point out, like, the technology industry comes in hype waves, and they generally correspond to decades, right? So 90s was very clearly, the web, right? Um, the 2000s are interesting because the first part of the decade was really about social. Thinking MySpace, Facebook, et cetera, et cetera. Then you had the 2010s, late 2000s, early 2010s was really about mobile
Mhm.
and the cloud, right? And I think that those are kind of two sides of the same coin, right? You want to be able to, deploy something and scale quickly and update quickly. They I think they kind of made each other. I think they were kind of two peas in a pod. And I would say now we're clearly in AI is the hype wave story of the 2020s. Could that change? I mean, certainly a lot of people are concerned about we're being in the midst of an AI bubble. Um, Only time will tell. But I think that the next hype wave, in my opinion, is going to be somehow quantum related. Will it be a full-on practical quantum computer that you can drop in your server? Maybe. Will it be? But I think it's going to require a lot more quantum awareness, um, more so than that. And who knows? I mean, a lot of people thought that VR and the metaverse would be the hype wave of the 2020s. That kind of hit and landed with a thud. Um, Although I wouldn't count it out entirely yet. I think there's still time for that to cook. But until
Well,
there's a
because
practical use case for it.
yeah, because I think that you have to give that some time to cook because I do believe that, blockchain and encryption have their space in data privacy.
Yeah.
And so that I think is really, it doesn't sound very sexy, but I think that that's actually where it could be, king because, like I said, everybody's data is very exposed right now. And I think people are feeling exposed. When you feel exposed, you get vulnerable, you don't make the right decisions. So I think that that's a problem for sure. So yeah, there's a future. I don't think it's as big as what they wanted to make it. I remember when I made my Twitter name, Mama of Metaverse.
Mama
Uh,
Metaverse.
right? I was like, I am so smart. I have the best Twitter handle in the world. At the time, I was working for a blockchain company. I'm like, I am that cool. Um, and then it hit the crypto. What was it? They call it the crypto winter, and then that was it, right? Because whatever. But
But
anyway,
I still think it has some kind of future to it. It won't be, as big as people thought. But I do think that there's some value there. I think time will tell. And when it comes to VR, again, I don't want to sidetrack too much, is that I've been playing with VR in one form or the other since the mid 90s, right? So there used to be something called virtual reality markup language. Um, you know, that never really took off, right? It was the idea that you can kind of create this virtual environment in your browser and explore 3D space through there. It had some interesting ideas. And then there was something a few years later called Adobe Atmosphere, which was like this way you can create these 3D worlds and interact with them. I do find it interesting to watch what the kids do, right? So the kids have, not this last Christmas, but the Christmas before, they got the Meta headsets, the Oculus, and for a while it was all the rage. That's the only thing they would play. Then they stopped, and over the last couple of days, they started getting back into it, which I find interesting.
right.
I just think it's going to be a video game platform for the foreseeable future. Although I will say, when I was flying, one guy had the fancy Apple one,
Okay. Oh yeah.
and that would be great because you could just not be like on an airplane with like the seat like right in front of your face. That would be useful. But
See, I just use one of those blackout masks
right,
that
right,
as soon as
right.
I get on, they have like these nice, like beautiful cat eyes and
I have
it-
these like
yeah.
soundproof things that I listen to, but I'm very much a believer in that quantum is going to be like kind of the next hype wave.
Hmm.
And I think that, for our listeners, even if you don't have a degree in physics, I don't,
I don't either.
um, if you start getting familiar with the terminologies sooner rather than later, you're going to have a much more interesting career trajectory than you don't. And, you know, when we were talking with the various startup founders that we were talking to, right? Like,
Mhm.
they said, what do you think of, the potential for um, quantum is? And, I always start with the encryption and the national security aspect because where I live, right? I live where that's kind of a topic of much concern. And, but, also too, like, whatever country, company, et cetera, develops quantum computing first is going to have these advantages in pharmaceutical research, material science, cryptography, right? Like all of these things are going to you're going to get with it. You're going to kind of get for free, right? You kind of buy the happy meal, right? And you get the burgers and the fries and the toy, right? And you can tell I have little kids, but I think it's one of those things where I think it's going to be the storm clouds, as it were, are all kind of forming in one way, and it's just clearly it's going to be a big deal.
I agree, and that's why I'm so excited to, talk about this with you and expand my knowledge and my understanding. And, we're going to be speaking to, we have been behind the scenes, speaking to some startup founders that, are involved in the quantum space and are so excited about what they're doing, and how they really see how what they're doing will bring about really positive optimization and change for the whole global, economy, uh, which I think is great. It's not just about, I'm developing a product and it's for this reason, but this is to actually make things better.
Right.
Uh,
And there's nothing wrong with developing products, but like how many more B2B SaaSes can the world like take? You know what I mean? Like it's kind of like I think once we start getting, because I think one of the criticisms of technology is that, it went from, being very optimistic and very, change the world to, becoming just about money. And don't get me wrong, I like money as much as the next guy or gal, but I think quantum has a unique opportunity for folks to do both, make money and change the world in a way that we haven't really seen since probably the advent of the personal computer, or maybe the advent of the internet being a consumer tool. So Candace and I have been working on the behind the scenes, and it's not going to be just her and me kind of talking in the future. We're going to have more guests, more doing this. But if you want to stay up to date on all the happenings in this space, I highly recommend you go to impactquantum.com. Once again, it's impactquantum.com, and click on join. You can join our newsletter, and we'll get you up to date on some of the things that we're working on, and you'll be more aware of the cool stuff that we got working in the pipeline behind the scenes. Some interesting startups, some interesting founders, and some academic folks that we hope to have on the show and kind of talk about what's coming.
Exactly. And to round out more information, so, please, so contact us and subscribe, and let us know, if you want to, where this is going to be posted. You want to add any notes, any questions, what you would like to hear more about. We'd love to know, and we want to be here, for our own edification and yours. So thank you so much.
Thank you, and we'll let Bailey finish the show.
And that's a wrap for this episode of Impact Quantum. We've covered everything from quantum annealing to national security, from the top players in the field to the global race for quantum dominance. Whether you're a seasoned quantum expert or just quantum curious, we're thrilled to have you along for the ride. Want to stay updated on the latest breakthroughs, industry trends, and mind-bending quantum concepts? Head over to impactquantum.com and subscribe to our newsletter. That way, you'll never miss an episode or a chance to impress your friends with your quantum knowledge. If you enjoyed the show, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with fellow quantum enthusiasts. And if you have questions or topics you'd love us to cover, let us know. We're always up for a good quantum discussion. Thanks for listening, and until next time, stay curious, stay quantum, and don't get lost in super